You are about to enter the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast on shockwaveskullsessions.com. And now your host, Bob Nalbandian.
Mr. Wendell Neeley goes by the name of just Neeley because he's cool like that. He's a one-namer.
Yeah, it's just my last name, man. It's what I've gone by ever since I was a youngster. Hey, Neeley!
Very cool. And with Neeley, we got the one and only Leonard Spittle, his first time on the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast.
Hello, Bobo. I think for this podcast, I would like to be known as Spickle only.
Another one-namer. Very cool. What was that? Fuck. Now I can't even remember the fucking. I can't remember now. Fuck. The guy from Get Him to the Greek was in it. His first big major break movie before Adventureland. McLovin. When the cops go, oh, he's just a one-namer. McLovin.
Oh,
you know that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Super bad.
Super bad. That's
right.
The name.
That was a great movie.
Anyway, I wanted to put you guys together because I know Neeley was on the original Skull Sessions maybe a couple times. I know we did a great grunge episode with the mighty David Ellefson, and I believe Martin Popoff was on that as well, right?
Was.
And myself, yeah.
I could not believe when I look back that was like 11 years ago, Bob.
That's true. That was like 2009, 2010. Anyway, I want to begin with a news story. You might have seen this. I just saw this literally earlier today. The clickbait headline on this news site was, Jakey Lee calls Jimmy Page, Ace Frehley, and Joe Perry sloppy guitar players. And I clicked on the story, and it said, Jakey Lee talks about those three guitar players, and he said, yeah, they had this sloppy style to them, which I really loved. It was cool. It wasn't super technical. It was more about feel and blues. It wasn't like an Yngwie Malmsteen, all technical, but it was a very loose kind of sloppy style, which I think is fucking great. So he's complimenting these guys, and of course the clickbait makes it sound like he's, bagging on them, and that's the kind of thing that these news sites are doing these days. You notice that a lot there, Neeley?
I do, and even back in the 80s, and I'll tell you a quick story, I used to work at a club up in the high desert, up in Victorville, California, back in the 80s, called the Pegasus, and it was a very modern club for its time. We had a lot of big screens, projection video, and whatnot, and I used to DJ there. The guy that would be the main DJ, he and I would hang out, and prior to the club opening, we would always play The Song Remains the Same video.
Right.
So we would project it up on the screen, then we would sit there and watch Led Zeppelin, The Song Remains the Same, and just kind of comment on the performance, which was, of course, 1973?
No, well, it was recorded in 73. It came out as a movie in 77, I believe.
Right, but it was recorded in 73.
Right, House of the Holy Tour.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And my friend and DJ, he was a guitarist, and he would comment to me what a sloppy guitarist that Jimmy Page was, but it was his own style, and it was kind of an ad-lib type thing, Yeah. And as you just, reiterated, that Jimmy Page was not a technical guitarist. He sort of just kind of played whatever he felt at that moment, even though it was constructed into the song that he was playing, but it was never the same twice.
And that's basically what, blues-based guitar players do. They play by feel, not by technique, because most of them were more self-taught, even though, of course, Jimmy was a session player, but that was the charm of it. But, bands can't say anything these days without it coming off sounding negative. And it, like I said, it reflects on, whoever did the initial interview or whatever, the publicist or whoever will blame them for, hey, what'd you say? So I didn't say anything. I printed exactly what he said. It's the news site that made it sound like it's a negative comment, when actually, in this case, Jakey Lee was complimenting. But, it really sucks that artists nowadays can't give an honest opinion. They can't say, this band sucks. Or even if they say something like, I don't really care for this band's new album. The headline is, so-and-so bashes the new, so-and-so or whatever.
But the thing is, there obviously is a financial component to internet articles, podcasts, interviews, whatnot. So the whole thing is, as you mentioned,
Clickbait.
you use the term clickbait.
Yeah.
That's the whole idea. I mean, to get somebody to click on that article, it's oh my God, what did they say? And then, as you said, you read through it, if you even read through it, because everybody just reads the headlines. And they go, he didn't say that at all.
Yeah. Well, that's the other part is these websites know that as long as they just click the story, they don't, most listeners won't take the time to listen to the full hour-long podcast. But if you listen to the whole podcast and you see it's nothing what the clickbait says, and, but you'll read all these comments, oh, what an asshole, Jakey Lee is, who the fuck is he, man, to slag off, and it's like, listen to the fucking whole interview and then make your goddamn comment.
Well, Bob, since nobody listens through the whole hour, we're about 10 minutes in. Should we just end it here?
Yeah, I think we should. What's the clickbait topic of this one? Actually, we don't need a fucking clickbait topic, or there could be many, because the fact of what I said is Spickle and Neeley don't give a fuck.
That's why you have us on, Bob. We'll talk shit about anybody.
Absolutely.
Well, I think the hot topic of today is that Lenny is transitioning into Spickle.
Yes.
And I think that will grab headlines right and left.
Absolutely. He's a gender transcender.
What would be the proper terminology from one transitioning from their first name into their last name?
Homo?
Or perhaps I should just be a symbol.
Pretentious douchebag?
Yes, I'll go with that one.
I like that.
Yes.
Neeley and I are good like that because we finally got to meet at the History of Heavy Metal.
Oh, that's right. At the screening for Band vs. Brand at the Hall of Heavy Metal History.
Which, by the way, Bob, that was a very quality documentary that you did, not only because it features myself, but overall, the subject material and the guests and the content alone was top of the line.
So I thought it sucked.
Yeah, hell, thank you, Leonard. I mean, Mr. Spickle. Or just Spickle. Yeah, we got great response, great reviews. It was really good. The unfortunate thing is, now there's so many documentaries out there. I mean, it did well, but, you're competing with so many music documentaries. And as you guys know, we put it up on streaming. You have to compete with everyone else. And so, the DVD sales aren't like what they used to. So, and the streaming revenue, just like music, is pennies for movies. So it's not a huge financial thing, but the fact that people seem to love it, and it was a great topic that I don't think was really ever covered in a proper documentary. And the fact that we had Mr. Neeley in it made all the difference in the world, obviously.
It was cutting edge, Bob. Cutting edge.
There you go. And again, the other reason I got you both on is because, as Neeley stated earlier, you lived in L.A., or actually the San Bernardino area, which is pretty interesting, from the late 80s through early 90s. Is that correct? Early to mid 90s?
85 to 91.
And Leonard was basically
Spickle.
Spickle came over from Connecticut back in
1985.
85, and joined Eden in late 86. Played all the clubs. So this is the prime era. I think what you said, from 85 to 91. That was when L.A. was just absolutely booming as far as the Los Angeles hard rock and metal scene all over L.A. from the from Orange County to Los Angeles to the San Bernardino area. So we'll kind of touch on some of that stuff. Of course, Lenny was in a band that I managed called Eden. They put out a great album on Enigma in March of 86, and the A&R person at the label bailed before the album came out. So we were supposed to get the Poison promotion, the promotion that Poison got, and we were supposed to be the first band on Capitol distribution. This was, of course, before Poison got signed, and as soon as Poison got signed and our A&R man left, who basically was our cheerleader for the label, we got screwed. So shortly after that, the band kind of imploded with the vocalist Mike Henry, formed his own band called Armed Forces, and then we had decided, instead of getting a rhythm guitarist, vocalist, we'll get a second guitar player, which was, of course, the mighty Spickle. And we got a separate singer, which was a man by the name of Mike Stone, who came over from Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. 19 years old. He flew in, heard about Eden, looking for a singer, and we were, of course, getting some airplay on a lot of national radio stations and Metal Shop and stuff like that. And Mike was familiar with the song Pound It Out, hearing it on Metal Shop and the local radio out in Wisconsin. And he flew out to audition, and at 19, he had no money in his pocket. He joined the band, and there was the new Eden with Spickle and Mike Stone. So, and after that, just to give you guys a little history on Spickle, after that, Lenny, you were an Animal. That was shortly after Eden disbanded in like 89.
Yeah, it was 1989. Randy Piper started Animal after he left Wasp, and they were looking for a bass player.
Oh, that's right. You played bass with Animal.
Yeah, I picked up the bass, and Alex Nelson from Lizzie Borden was in the band, and
right.
And we had some fun. It was a good time.
Awesome. And of course, now Leonard is the guitar player, second guitar player in Snoo.
Yes, the mighty Snoo.
Snoo you, pal.
And speaking of Snoo, I've got a little what's the word I'm looking for? I got a little preview to announce later on in the show.
All right, you want to keep the suspense going. I know we've got millions of listeners sitting on the edge of their seat, waiting to hear the big Snoo announcement. Breaking news on Snoo. I know Neeley's a big Snoo fan. I know you had Curtis Don
I am a big Snoo fan, and since Spickle brought up Snoo, and he is a part of the band now, I got to ask you, Spickle, and I'm a big fan of Curtis and what Snoo has done. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that Snoo, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Snoo obviously is a studio project. I know you guys do play live periodically, but what is the focus of Snoo as far as being a entity or a band? Is it just to record songs or music when you have it, or is it to be a active touring entity, or what is the dynamic of the band?
Come on, Neeley, you should know this. It's all about the pussy, right, Spickle?
Maybe when we were 20. We've decided that we want to be the band that does the least amount of shows ever. The absolute honest answer to that is we have been self-run since the inception of the band. We've peaked as band members trying to promote and run the band. So none of us are managers or promoters. And the bottom line is, without that representation, we've just hit a brick wall. And that's really the truth. We need management. We need representation. We need someone or a company to get, behind the band and get us out there. By all means, we would love to be touring, love to be on the road. And I think it's a sign of the times, too, because a lot of bands are struggling right now with touring and getting out there. So, but we're not even to that level, so we're struggling even harder.
Absolutely. And that's a good segue I want to mention. I, of course, want to also give Curtis Don Vito props that he was the editor and associate producer for some of the previous Inside Metal titles. So a fantastic editor as well, Curtis is. But, something, you really got to give a band like Snoo credit. I'm not just saying this to kiss Spickle's ass here, but the band, and I know you know several bands in the Midwest, a band similar as Red Rain, that have done things all on their own, basically for the love of it, and put their own time and money, invested their own time and money. And you look at a band like Snoo, what you got, this is your fourth album that just came out, right?
Fourth album, yeah.
And
great album, too.
A great album, fantastically produced album, super professional done. You've done videos for your songs, real pro. I mean, nearly like MTV style videos. I know Neeley's a big fan of the Pull My Stinger video.
I love that video.
Yeah, you really got to give artists like Snoo and Red Rain and some of these other artists that are doing it on their own without the label support, because as you guys know, there's very little label support. But even so, I mean, a lot of these bands have frontiers and other distribution channels. Snoo has done it completely 100% independent, and you really got to give props to the band.
But again, you can only do so much. We've done Rocklahoma twice. We've done a couple of USA tours. We did the Hard Rock Hellfest in Wales last year
with Saxon, right?
With Saxon, and there was a couple of the big names there. It was pretty cool. But again, we got that gig from a management company and an attorney that I had met and started working with, and I thought we were developing a relationship. They hooked us up with this UK tour and that festival, and once it was over, I never heard a peep from them again. It's like, wow. I don't get it. We're all ready to go and promoting the album, and we had plenty of airplay and radio and magazines and online shit going on, and it just seems to all just vanish. It just went to the black hole abyss.
Well, did you ever consider it might have been a one night stand there, Spickle?
Well, we usually like that, but
you don't like when it happens to you. They just don't call, they don't text, they don't email. You're just like left with, what the fuck? I've been used, I've been abused, I've been fucked in the ass, and no call, no kiss, no.
Wait, Lenny, was this manager a chick that you were dating, and then she found out that you were fucking her best friend? Because I'll tell you, this has happened many a times before with Mr. Spickle. So come on, be honest now. You're on the Skullsessions podcast.
Anything is possible. So, I'm gonna leave that one open.
Wow.
Because you never know.
Interesting.
So yeah, we would love to be doing all that and be partaking in all the fruits of the musical industry, but we seem to be the band that never ever does a gig.
Speaking about the music industry, I know I'm going all over the place, but of course, I didn't make any show notes or anything because we don't do that on this podcast. But something that's been all over the news, and I don't know if you had covered this, Neeley, this last week. You heard about the whole Universal fire that happened a decade ago, right? At Universal Studios.
No, I was not aware what happened.
Oh, geez, this is crazy. There was a giant fire back in 2008, right? Over a decade ago.
11 years ago.
11 years ago in the Universal Studios lot. And in the lot were all these master tapes.
Oh, I didn't know this. This is really news to me.
It's a huge scandal. I mean, now all the artists are doing this big lawsuit. My question is how Universal kept this a secret for over 10 years. We're talking here. I just popped it up. Universal Music Group has found itself in the center of a media storm this week, following revelations over original recorded masters, which went up in flames over a decade ago. The New York Times article claimed that up to 500,000 master recordings of songs were damaged in the fire, which took place on a backlot at NBC Universal Studios in Hollywood in 2008. Original recordings, check this out, by the likes of Chuck Berry, Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, Aretha Franklin, Elton John, and Snoop Dogg are likely to have been rendered unplayable by the damage.
That sounds like NASA losing the footage to the first moon landing.
Yeah, but that was fucking back in the 60s. This is in the day of internet and social media and cell phone cameras and everything else. And to think that a scandal like this could happen and be completely fucking silenced for over 10 years where nobody leaked it out. I mean, it's fucking crazy.
Same thing happened with MySpace. They lost most of their data. Everyone that had music stored on MySpace, disappeared as well.
That was pretty well known because that just happened fairly recently, and that came out like soon after they lost all the music, didn't it?
I have no idea. I just remember going to try to find some old shit that I had recorded on there, and it was gone.
Right.
But yeah, that's really sad. I mean, that's, you're talking about some actual, some real icons in the music industry. That's real history, archived history that's gone. Right.
And, stuff on website, when you talk about, anything on MySpace or Facebook or even YouTube, that's people posting their shit up for free. This isn't, there's no value really to that kind of thing. And, right. and I don't think anyone's going to you don't put your master tapes on social media,
MySpace.
on MySpace. It's a digital outlet. These are the actual mastered 2-inch recordings. So I'm surprised, Neeley, you're not familiar with this story, huh?
I did not know that, but I like the way that you keep enunciating the word master.
Master Bates.
You are my master, Neeley.
Right. Well, I certainly hope during this Universal Music fire that none of those valuable Eden recordings had been lost.
Or Snoo.
Well, I'll tell you a secret is I snaked the fucking 2-inch. I got the 2-inch tapes of Eden and the 1/4-inch tapes in my mom's closet at Huntington Beach.
I think there's probably a lot more things in your mom's closet that you own than you are admitting, Bob.
There's a lot of skeletons in there, believe you me.
Well, Spickle mentioned that he was looking for management for Snoo, and the guy that has managed before, I think, is by the name of Bob Nalbandian, who's a player in the music business. Why isn't Bob stepping up to manage Snoo?
Dude, I haven't been a player in the music business for 30 years. I have no idea. I mean, as far as the record business, I mean...
Bobo's a big producer now, man. He's way beyond, local LA band management.
But even that last time I worked with a label, I worked at Roadrunner in the early 90s. I worked at Herb Cohen's Bizarre Straight Records and, did some independent stuff and a lot of music licensing with bands overseas. And, dude, that was so long ago. The whole industry, as you guys know, in the last 20, 30 years have changed drastically. So I wouldn't have a clue of how to work, in today's music environment. When I worked at Roadrunner doing publicity, you had publicity where you actually mailed out cassettes and CDs to everyone. You had retail where you sent them out to the record stores and you would meet the record stores buyers, set up in stores, set up promos. You did radio, where you would call the radio stations, push your stuff on radio. There's none of that anymore. Now it's all social media.
We actually have Paris Records out of Texas. Tom Mathers. I don't know if you guys know.
Yeah, Neeley knows him pretty well, right?
I know Tom very well.
Yeah, Tom's a really good friend of mine. Great guy. He's been doing a little bit of work with Snoo recently. We just got a little bit of a distribution thing going now with him. And I think he just put out a big sampler of all his bands, and Snoo is actually on that sampler release. So that's pretty cool. So shout out, thanks to Tom. He's been helping us out a little bit. It's been nice.
Another label you should definitely hit up, speaking of Tom's label, I know Chris actually just did an interview with him. His last name escapes me, from David Ellison's label, EMP. And they revamped Combat Records, the old 80s metal label, and they got some great bands on that label. They just signed Ron Keel is on that label, a great band called Last Crack. Of course, David Ellison's projects he has with bassist Frank Bello and Dollskin, a bunch of great bands. They have Autograph. You should hit them up, Lenny. I'll give you their info. Tom Hazard is his name.
We'll get together on that. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
You keep bringing up Keel, so since we're going to be talking about strange stories from back in the 80s,
let's start this off.
I saw Keel probably 1983 or 1984, and you know how rock stars wore the very tight pants back then. So he had either wet himself or he had picked up something on his tour because there was a wet spot on the front of his pants, and you could tell he wasn't happy about it.
That's your memory of Ron Keel. Huh?
That's my memory of Ron Keel.
So you were looking at his crotch.
I couldn't help it because it was just right there.
It just drew your eyes to him.
My eye went right to the wet patch.
Well, maybe that was a preconceived idea. Maybe he wasn't really looking for dudes to look at his wet patch. He was hoping chicks would look that way.
We might have to investigate this. We might have to ask Ron about
this. Might have to ask Ron. Hey, dude, what was with the wet patch on your pants?
Absolutely.
Back in 1983?
Fuck, after 30 years, I can't get that wet patch on Ron Keel's crotch out of my head.
I bet you Yngwie and him got in a fight, and Yngwie threw a drink on his crotch. See, this is what you get. Now you have to go on stage with a wet crotch.
Right.
Like that story about Yngwie in the airport where he's...
You've unleashed the fury.
Exactly. And
bitch threw a drink on me. You've unleashed the fury.
This was not a drink spill. This was it was there for a reason.
How do you know? Did you smell it?
I I tasted it. It was. I've had that taste in my mouth before. It's horrible.
Very nice. A nice Hollywood Nights reference.
Man, yeah.
I actually
Oh, you
met
got
Ron
that.
Keel and Yngwie in a parking lot in Pennsylvania at about 2 a.m. once. That was an interesting experience when they were on tour in Steeler.
And where in Pennsylvania would this be?
Yeah, you're an old Pennsylvania guy, Neeley.
Yeah, this was in a little town called Franklin, which is just north of Pittsburgh.
It's northeast of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, exactly. I was walking home from my girlfriend's house, and I stopped by the Sheets for a hot dog and a Coke, and these long-haired guys were hanging out in the parking lot in a van. So me, as a young kid in high school, inspiring to be a musician, took it upon myself to walk over and say hello, and we started chatting, and they said their band name was Steeler, and I had never heard of them, didn't have a clue, and I met Yngwie and didn't know who he was, and of course later on in life, found out who these cats were that I met in a parking lot.
So they were parked in a van down along the Allegheny River.
Absolutely correct. They were also enjoying a hot dog at the Sheets.
Very good.
It's not all fun and glamour like everyone thinks.
So, Neeley, tell us about some of the 80s LA metal experiences. You had to have gone up to Hollywood. I know you said you frequented the Rainbow, and did you go to Gazzari's or even like FM Station or?
I did. I've been to FM Station. I would go to the Rainbow, the Whiskey, the Roxy. When I was thinking about being a part of this episode, for some reason, a band that I went to see on the suggestion of a friend, and they weren't even like a metal band. They were more kind of a poppy band. And they were handing out 45s. This is back when bands were promoting themselves, putting out their own media, pressing their own records, not CDs, but records.
Right.
And I actually still have the 45 in a sleeve that they were handing out to the crowd.
Motley Crue, Too Fast for Love.
No.
Or the Stick to Your Guns.
I wish.
I had that.
And the name of the band was called Her Obsession.
I thought it was going to be some famous band.
No, it wasn't a famous band, but this was back when everybody and anybody was trying to break it and make a record deal and, obviously make it in the music business. And that was the name of the band, Her Obsession.
Did anyone from that band ever do anything?
Not that I'm aware of.
Where are they now?
It's funny you say that. It's funny you say that because before I moved to California, I was living in Connecticut, and I was in a band called Murder Suite. And I saw an ad for $500, press your own record. You get like 500 copies. So we did that. We made this awesome record. And believe it or not, that thing, I'm getting calls from all around the world. People want a copy of that. And I saw it sell on eBay for $125.
Very nice.
It's amazing. Yeah. But
those old demos and those old independent things, even from no-name bands.
Yeah, it was a little 45 record, because that's what we did back then. We took those records and tried to get them out to everybody we could.
Yeah, well, that August Red Moon album sells for like 300 plus.
That's
the
bizarre.
original EP, yeah. A lot of that stuff is super rare. So, it's funny because back then, everyone in LA, as Neeley and Lenny, we were a part of it. I mean, it was all about flyers. It's way before social media, so everyone and their mother was flyering. I mean, you saw Poison out every night when they were a local band. And I got a funny story. Actually, I don't know if you were in the band. This would have been 80s. This was still 86 with Mike Henry. After the Eden record came out, we did a show at the Country Club. And Eden we were all over KNAC, the song Pounded Out, and She Burns with Fire. So we had a big local following. A lot of bands came out. Other local bands would come out to see us. And so we're at the Country Club. And as you might remember, Neeley, Country Club wasn't like the Hollywood. Eden kind of looked glammy in their photos and stuff, but they were a much heavier band than definitely than the glammy Poisons and all that, and much more musical band. And so we played, tried to kind of avoid the Hollywood area. That's why we did a lot of shows in Orange County. And we did a show at the Country Club, which was the big place in LA at the time. And at the time, we had worked out a release with Enigma because the A&R guy left to go to Elektra Records. I won't mention his name, but he went to Elektra. He signed Jet Boy, and he signed another all-female band, and he wanted to sign Eden, to bring Eden over. So And Enigma basically dropped the ball. They wanted nothing to do. So I talked to an attorney and we wrote him a letter, said, we want a release. Will you release us from the contract? And at the time they did. And the guy at Elektra was really trying to get us. So he talked to the main A&R guy at Elektra. I'm trying to think of his name. Peter Philbin at the time. He was like the VP of A&R. So anyway, we're at the country club before the show. We're at the parking lot. You remember Cord, right, Lenny?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Cord was like the stage manager, and Dave and Rick. We're all hanging out, and we see these guys totally fucking glammed out. I mean, glammed out even more than Poison. This is 86, a little bit kind of early on still, before the real glam thing, it came out. And then they're talking to us, hey, guys, what's up, man? Who are you guys? I said, we're eating, we're playing tonight. Oh, cool, yeah, I heard you guys on Candy. And then they give us a flyer, and I, looking at it, what the fuck is your name? Easter Pussycat? And they started laughing. No, it's Faster Pussycat. And it was a couple of the guys from Faster Pussycat, the guys from out of town. And they're like, yeah, we just moved down. And I guess, they hooked up with Tammy and looking to promote themselves. And they're like, yeah, where do we go? What do we do? And of course, Cord, being the sarcastic asshole that he's going, man, like you guys, there's a place on Santa Monica Boulevard called The Rage. That's where you guys should be promoting your stuff. And if you don't know, Santa Monica Boulevard is the big gay part of town, and Rage was the big gay club. And of course, Rage, we'll definitely have to check that out. And of course, Rick, being the cool guy that he is, Rick Croco, rest in peace, our guitar player, is like, dude, don't tell him that shit. He goes, no, that's a gay club, But go down to Gazzari's, go down there. That's more the Hollywood, glammy kind of crowd. So these guys, like, basically knew nothing or whatever. And then I remember seeing them inside the club by the restroom, and they're handing out flyers, like, in the restroom to all these guys. And, like I said, Eden had more of a metal kind of crowd, not really big on the whole glam thing. And I remember he was giving flyers to some guy in the restroom, and he goes, Faster Pussycat, and he crumples it up, throws it in the urinal, and starts pissing on it. He goes, this is what I think of Faster Pussycat. And just to look at the band member's face is like, oh, fuck. And I'm thinking, going to myself, these guys aren't going to last more than 2 months in this town. Fast forward, like 2 months later, I see this band all over Band Magazine, all these ads. And then I call up the guy from Elektra saying, hey, have you talked to, Peter Philbin? We're doing this show. And he's like, yeah, he's working on signing this new band, but I pumped him up on you guys. He's going to come see you guys. And I go, well, who is this new band? And he's like, they're called Faster Pussycat. And I'm going, you got to be fucking kidding me. And personally, I can't stand that band. I heard that album, The Number on the Bathroom Wall, and saw them live, and I'm like, what the fuck? But, they became fairly popular, and they, busted their ass. And, after we saw them that night at the country club, I'm thinking, these guys aren't going to last more than a month or two. And then I see them all over BAM, putting out ads all over the clubs. The self-promotion back then, before social media, was going out every fucking night, promoting yourself. And for the Hollywood scene, that was the key to making it at the time.
And Curtis Don Vito made 90% of those flyers. His father owned a print shop. He was the main guy.
Mark Anthony, right?
Yeah. He was doing all those flyers for those guys. But, the Faster Pussycats, the Poisons, the LA Guns, I mean, people were just starving for that kind of imagery as well. Maybe not the best songwriters, but great entertainers and that whole image, that LA, sleaze rock thing. I mean, that was huge.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, Motley Crue, obviously, they were, of course you had Van Halen and other bands that broke out in the late 70s, but when Motley Crue broke out, and of course Quiet Riot, but more so Motley Crue with the image, all the labels were looking for that, and the image just got more glammier and more feminine looking. And then when Poison came, and say what you want about Poison, and I personally can't stand the band, but they fucking busted their ass. They did whatever it is to make it, and they were out there, and right place at the right time for sure. Neeley, thoughts, please.
Well, yeah, again, the music that caught my ears, and I've told this story on the Classic Metal Show before. I started college in the fall of '82 and started working at a Camelot record store, which was a music chain mostly in the East and Midwest. And obviously Tower Records was the record chain for the West Coast. But, being exposed to a lot of music, working at Camelot Music, I discovered a lot of metal bands that were on the rise. And, I'll remember this like it happened yesterday. The first quote unquote metal band, or a band that's considered metal in its day, was Queensryche. I remember seeing the first Queensryche self-titled EP coming into the store, and obviously it was the name that caught my eye. It was just like Queens, right? What is this? Queensryche.
And that was on their independent label, right? 206 Records before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And of course, the Queen of the Reich, made it to MTV because MTV had just launched that same year.
Right.
I was right in the thick of things. And then the next record that came across into my radar was Dokken. It's like, what is this? This Dokken, what is this? So I'm
I wish I had the Wheezy bumper right now. Continue.
And then, of course, Quiet Riot hit with Metal Health. And then Def Leppard really hit big with, obviously,
Hysteria or Pyromania?
Pyromania.
Yeah.
Pyromania was huge.
Well, wasn't the Quiet Riot? Quiet Riot was before Dokken, wasn't that, in 83 when that hit?
Well, Dokken came out in 82, the self-titled.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so it was just starting to infiltrate. But at the same time, one of the biggest sellers in the store was what they were calling the new wave. They were calling it new wave, and it was obviously Eurythmics and Culture Club and
Duran
INXS and Thompson Twins and all that stuff. So they were competing. And then, of course, the big player on the market was Michael Jackson's Thriller. That was major. So I was being hit by all different sides here with what was becoming, quote unquote, heavy metal to pop to new wave. I was getting bombarded with all this stuff. But, of course, I was drawn to the heavy metal right away because Crocus came out with Headhunter at that time. And then, of course, the Police were out. So that was the quote unquote the punk movement, I guess, for that. It was more mainstream, obviously,
new wave,
new wave, punky stuff. So the Police were big. But what was driving all that, obviously, was MTV, the invention of MTV and cable television and whatnot. So that was the big driver. And of course, commercial radio at that time was actually playing this stuff. Not that they would play it today, but at that time, commercial radio was actually picking that up and playing it. So not only were you hearing it in your car, you were hearing it at the record stores, and you were watching it on TV. So in my mind, as far as the expanse of music was concerned, whether it was pop, new wave, punk, metal, rock, whatever, that was probably the greatest era in music as far as I was concerned.
Absolutely.
It was definitely a good time to be a part of. We had a lot of fun, and the music was pretty cool in all genres. Well,
talk about some of the fun you had, Spickle.
I thought you said you want to keep this PG.
No, I said I don't.
We didn't have any fun. We were too busy working.
I know, Neeley, you're talking about the major markets and the major bands and the major labels and the push they had to retail. I know working at a record store, because I know even when I was at Roadrunner doing independent retail stuff, we serviced the record stores with all sorts of stuff, posters, CDs, or vinyl at the time for them to play, and you would call the record stores up and giving them whatever they can to play it to the customers that are in there. It was called retail promotion.
Absolutely, and we did that. Every hour we played a different album.
Right.
I mean, we had the latest of whatever it was that was on the shelf that week, and we had to play one of the new albums during that hour. No matter what it was, whether it was classic rock or pop or punk or whatever it was, we were playing one album an hour.
And when it came to the local scene, a lot of people are familiar with the old radio station KNAC. We had KLOS, and even before that, people that remember KMET. Do you remember KMET at all, Neeley?
Absolutely. I mean,
Okay, you were
they were featured in the
Metal
Dokken
Shop.
video.
Yeah.
Well, they were featured in the Dokken video too for It's Not Love.
They were
trailer
the
on
great
the road.
station, and they had something called it was the Mighty Metal Hour, I think, and they would play a lot of the local bands and a lot of the independent bands that were on Metal Blade, Armored Saint. They played Warrior, Fighting for the Earth, off a demo tape, and Great White when they were independent, Rat when they were independent. And so this was the beginning of independent bands and local bands. These are bands that just put out records on their own. And like I said, in the case of Warrior, they were playing it off a fucking demo tape. And some of these songs got added to rotation, regular rotation. You could hear Armored Saint, False Alarm, which was a 3-song EP on Metal Blade. This was the beginning of Metal Blade when they were a very small label. So they really promoted the local metal scene. And then, of course, when KNAC came into play in 85, 86, this is right at the time Eden came out. When the album came out, boom, KNAC were all over Pounded Out, She Burnt the Fire, getting heavy rotation. We would play Jezebels, and you probably remember a lot of these shows, Lenny. Jezebels or the Marquee or the Waters Club. We would have Tom Mastery, who was fucking great, or Long Paul. They would come out, they would do it on the air and tell everyone it'd be a big KNAC night. So you would hear it on the radio station. Eden is playing the Waters Club, come on down. And, they would do like a little live feed with Tom Mastery. And that was huge. And that was great. And that was what was so damn cool about radio stations back then, is you had that local appeal. You had the in-stores. I remember Eden did an in-store. And again, this is just before you joined, but it was in Montebello, which is a very Hispanic neighborhood in East LA. And I remember the guys were so pissed off at me because this was 86. At the time, Poison were doing their big in-store at Tower Records on Sunset Boulevard. They're like, why the fuck is Poison? They're on the same label. I'm saying, hey, dude, they're getting support from the label. We had no support, but there was this record store in Montebello that were selling a shitload of Eden records called Wild Rags. And they were a total metal store. And their big sellers were like Slayer at the time. I think the Raiden Blood album had just come out, and Judas Priest, Metallica, Master of Puppets, and the Eden record, because, people heard it on the radio and people loved it. So we go there, and they just totally thought it was going to be a Spinal Tap moment. It was like this small independent store in the middle of nowhere on this strip mall, and it was like a thrift shop. They sold all this metal clothing and stuff. And before we walk in, we see a line, and we're going, what the fuck's going on here? We walk in, there's over 400 people in line that came to see Eden. And of course, it was because, Tom Mastery was there as well, promoting it all through KNAC. We did a live in-store there, and it was like the band autographed tons of records and shit. And this is an independent band that had over 400 people at a records, this small thrift shop / record store in Montebello. That was the greatness of radio promotion, retail promotion.
Well, that's actually how I heard of the band. I mean, before I joined Eden, I heard Eden on the radio on KNAC. And you talked about, the glam scene. I was living in Hollywood and playing in a Hollywood band and wearing spandex and all that shit, tons of Aquanet in my hair. And when I got the audition for Eden, I don't know if you remember, Bob, but I showed up in holy jeans with spandex underneath my jeans.
I remember that.
And everybody kind of made fun of me. I think I almost didn't get hired just for that reason, because I was wearing spandex, because Eden was more of, kind of a hardcore.
We were trying to get more that way, yeah. I mean, if you look at the back of the Eden album cover, which was done by the
it was totally glam.
Yeah, it was done by Scarpati, who's a fucking great. He's a world-renowned photographer now, and great photography and as well. But back then, I mean, there was a time when even Metallica and Megadeth had big hair and all that, and the labels and all that were pushing. MTV were pushing that look, so they're like,
even Slayer. Look at some old Slayer pictures, man. It's creepy.
Yeah. But that was a very threat, and I was always pushing the band to get more heavier. And Dave kind of was into the glammier image, and it was all about getting the chicks. That's what the chicks dug at the time. The thrash bands weren't drawing the female artists, but bands like
Right.
Poison and all that were. So Eden thought, well, let's try to be somewhere in between. We love bands like Armored Saint, and even they had more of like a Road Warrior image. Them and Warrior and Malice and stuff. They weren't quite thrash and they weren't quite glam. And at the point you joined with Mike Stone, we were trying to go for that too, trying to shed that glam image.
If you look at some of those old pictures, that shit we wore, and we didn't know what the fuck we were doing. We were caught somewhere between metal and retarded.
Yeah.
Can you say retarded on the show, Bob?
Yes, you can.
I have to appeal to the censors here.
Yes, as long as it's referring to Lenny and the guys in Eden, then it's okay to use.
Well, speaking of metal, Bob, and the fact that early '80s metal, caught fire and whatnot, you had mentioned earlier in the show that the show Metal Shop, which I enjoyed quite a bit. I listened to it as often as I could. That was hosted by a guy named Charlie Kendall.
Right. Yeah.
And I want to know if either you or Spickle can fill me in on Charlie Kendall at all, as far as him being a pioneer in metal radio, which, got syndicated across the nation.
Sure.
Which, in reality, that was a pretty fantastic feat, because metal, even though MTV popularized it for a short time there, that was kind of a niche thing. And to gain, 250 markets with Metal Shop was a pretty good feat. So could either one of you shed light on Metal Shop?
Yeah, that was at the time they called you had all these different formats of radio, AOR format, and this was a format they called pure rock. They didn't call it heavy metal, but it was basically, KNAC was pure rock. They would play all the newer metal bands, and that format really caught on. And Metal Shop, that's how Mike Stone heard Eden pounded out on Metal Shop when he was in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin at home. There was another station called Z Rock, which you might have remembered.
They were out of Texas.
Yeah, it's basically Tracy Barnes, who formed Hard Radio, Tracy Barnes and Lee Abrams, and they started a syndicated show. Actually started on AM, and that ended up getting syndicated to 27 affiliates. So I think that was right after Metal Shop, and syndication was kind of a big thing. And the big syndicated programs, like KLOS had running for years. Bob Coburn, who passed away a few years ago. What was Liveline?
Rockline.
Rockline. That was, I think, one of the original ones. And Charlie was kind of similar to, he was like more of the metal Bob Coburn. So I don't know what happened to him. It was like him and Jim Ladd was the big LA DJ on KMET at the time, and then went to KLOS. And, some of these DJs were almost treated like rock stars. And KNAC, which was actually a very... KNAC was only like 3,000 watts, but it was huge in the metal community. And Ton Mastery, she appeared everywhere, did all these public appearances at the clubs, and so did Long Paul, and so did Nasty Neil and Thrasher. So these guys were personalities that were almost like rock stars. So when they would come to your show and announce your show live and stuff, it was a big deal. It wasn't just like having now I guess you kind of had that with your buddy Eddie Trunk, who's got a syndicated show. They're still kind of doing that to an extent, but this was on a local level, and it was huge. And obviously with Metal Shop, I think once the formats changed and kind of grunge and all took over, that's when a lot of those things changed. And just like Headbangers Ball on MTV, that was the big thing throughout the 80s and early 90s. And then, the music scene changed. So I imagine that's basically what happened with Metal Shop.
Well, when I listened to Metal Shop, I used to listen to it. I think it came on Sunday nights, if I wasn't mistaken. And I just love their intro and their promo, because they'd have the big voice guy with Metal Shop. And then they'd have like a saw blade cutting like metal or something, And that's where I discovered Armored Saint, was on Metal Shop. I was just like, and here's Armored Saint, and it was just like, holy shit, this is kicking my ass. So Spickle, what's your thoughts? Input? Any thoughts on that at all?
I have no idea who that guy is, but I do remember Metal Shop, and I guess if he ran it, cool. But no, I got nothing.
Well, I know something you will remember, Thirsty One, is some of the great canny sea nights at just in Orange County alone. Some of at Marquee, Jezebel's. But you remember the Red Onions, all the Red Onion canny sea nights at Huntington Beach and Santa Ana, which was kind of borderline Irvine. There was one up in Brea, I think, in Fullerton. Lakewood.
Well, of course, we used to go out to the Red Onion and pick up chicks so we could take showers and eat.
Mike and Lenny lived in the studio, and I would come by there and call me around 4 o'clock. We would go to the happy hour, the Acacia Room. At the Black Angus or the Acacia Room had these killer happy hours. So I would buy a couple drinks and they would just eat. They had these killer buffets. And the Red Onion had the best buffet. I mean, you could eat like a king for free at the happy hour.
We always went to the Black Angus, and then we discovered the Acacia Room. It was a little tiny hole in the wall in Garden Grove.
No, but it was an exclusive kind of club. It was almost like a black tie kind of restaurant.
Yeah, it was mostly older people. And we walked in there, and they had like tri-tip and steak. And, here we are, looked like we were homeless. So we ate there for about 3 days. And the fourth day we went back there, they had little tiny frozen weenies and stuff. They knew we were coming back. So that was it for the Acacia Room.
It's funny because I was listening to, I've been listening. Have you heard Neeley, Ricky Rackman's got a Cat House podcast?
Now, I know that he launched that, and I have not listened to an episode yet. I'm aware of it.
I'll be honest, and I think I first heard about it because I know Joshua Toomey had him as a guest on his show. And I had heard about it, but I never listened to it. And I listened to the first couple episodes, and I thought, wow, this is great. He's telling some old stories. But then after I listened to a few episodes, I mean, the dude, he's like the Eddie Trunk before Eddie Trunk. It's all about him and all about the club, how the Cat House was the only club doing this. It was all about the Cat House. And I'm thinking during that time, late 80s, early 90s, there were so many clubs in LA. And everyone was a different night. Like the Cat House was obviously Tuesday. The Cat House was great, but it was more of a pretentious crowd. Yeah, you had a lot of the rock stars and whatever hanging out there. But on Sunday nights, you had Exposure 54. Remember that one, Lenny?
No, I don't think I ever went to that one. What years was that?
Fuck. That was like early 90s. They would have the cool bands, Armored Saint and Last Crack and Alice in Chains and all those bands. And there was the Thunderdome. You remember Thunderdome, which was the old Florentine Gardens. That was on Thursday night. I saw, Armored Saint there. I saw, Motorhead there, Alice in Chains, and Mookie Blaylock, who became Pearl Jam, opened up for them. So this was when the grunge started coming out and all. But these places were fucking packed, just as packed as the Cat House. So people that listen to that think, the Cat House, was the only club in that time. No, that's a bunch of bullshit. There was Spice was another one. And then
Faces, remember Faces?
Faces in Orange County, yeah. Faces in Huntington Beach.
Check your face at the door.
Yes. What was the other one? Fashions in Redondo Beach.
FM Station up in the valley.
Dude, FM Station was pumping.
That place was.
There were more chicks there, and there were more chicks at the Orange County clubs, and I'll say this on record, than any chicks at the Cat House. The Orange County clubs, especially those Red Onions and Faces and the Marquee, better pussy than any given night at Cat House. I mean, Cat House had the sleaziness, I get, and all that, but, Orange County women were cleaner, and they were, like, tan and beautiful and more voluptuous and not, like, really skinny, drugged-out-looking chicks. Remember Sugars? They had one right next to the Marquee.
Neeley, have you ever been to a Sugars? Do you remember Sugars?
I have not.
Sugars was like a little shit bar, but they had girls that wore
lingerie bar. Yeah, it's like a lingerie bar.
Lingerie bar, bikinis. I was living in an apartment in Anaheim, and actually, no, it was Garden Grove. I was living with Mike Stone, actually. We had an apartment, and our next-door neighbors were like the local pharmacy.
Would that be Gus?
Well, it was his roommates. It wasn't him. It was the other two. I don't remember what their names were. I walked out on the patio, and I'm talking to my neighbors, and they're like, hey, you want to go get a beer or something? I'm like, yeah, whatever. Fuck. It's like, Tuesday afternoon at 11:30 in the morning or whatever. Go down to this Sugars, and we walk in, and we sit down, and we start drinking. And apparently one of the bartenders there had fucked Rick. So she knew who I was, being the other guitar player for Eden. Rick was our other guitar player. So we started drinking, hanging out. We're there for a couple hours. And while we were there was one girl working there that was just absolutely stunning. Probably to this day, the best ass I've ever seen in my life. But never said a word to us, So we pack up. We're leaving. And then Rick's girlfriend comes out in the parking lot, and she says, "Hey, Lenny, Tiffany wants to buy you a beer." And I'm like, well, "Who's Tiffany?" She said, "Well, it's the girl that's wearing the red bikini, which had the perfect ass." So, of course, we go back in, and Tiffany comes over and bought us a pitcher of beer. And we started talking. I'm like, I sat here for 3 hours drinking. You never said a word, And she's giggling. I ended up hanging out with old Tiff for a couple of months there.
At least 2-3 months.
She would come to the studio.
And clean the place, right?
Yeah, and bring a 12-pack and clean the studio. And what about you, Neeley? Any good rock star stories that you partook in your little time in the LA scene?
Well, not necessarily rock star stories. I mean, I hung out in the scene a little bit, but as far as hanging out with any, named celebrities, my dalliance with named celebrities didn't come, unfortunately, until after I started the Classic Metal Show and got to know some of these guys on a personal level and, got to be very friendly with a lot of different people. As far as any kind of debauchery is concerned, I really don't have a lot of stories to share in that regard. It was fun for me because I was actually interested in the entertainment and the music that was going on. But as far as the hang and the party and all that.
So you never got laid is what you're saying.
No, I got laid a lot in the 80s, but it wasn't because I was drugging it up or boozing it up or, because I had any notoriety, because I didn't gain any kind of, celebrity notoriety until I started the show back in 96. So
but dude, you were the club DJ at the big bar there.
I did. And believe me, there were chicks always making some kind of move on that, but and I'm going to be honest with you, and I know Bob knows this. I know you don't know me there, Spickle, very well, but in the 80s, one of the biggest concerns was obviously the AIDS epidemic. It was just like, oh man, every other chick has AIDS.
Yeah, that's what everyone was thinking and saying at that time.
Yeah, so because I wasn't boozed up or drugged up out of my mind, I had a good sense about me, and it was just like, I don't know about that.
Yeah, well, that was the thing, is that most of the chicks, they were doing more drugs than the guys. I mean, they just loved cocaine. I mean, cocaine was the drug of choice then. They loved doing coke, and they loved boozing it up just as much, if not more, than the dudes. So,
well, I don't think that's changed. I was actually down at the Coach House a couple of years ago, just hanging out, and there's this smoking hot chick that was like hanging out in our group, and somehow somebody said something about cocaine. And she looked right at me and she goes, "You have cocaine? I will suck your cock right now if you have cocaine." And this is like just a couple of years ago. I'm like, what the fuck? Some things never change. You know what I mean?
Usually these days it's meth or crack or opiates, but cocaine. Wow.
Yeah. It was very strange.
I just had some baking powder in my pocket and I said, "Hey."
Neeley, I was going to ask you, being out in San Bernardino area, you had to have seen, what was it, the Orange Pavilion? Bands that play the Long Beach Arena, like Iron Maiden or Judas Priest, they would a lot of times do another show, because San Bernardino is about an hour and a half or 2 hours from LA and Orange County.
It's not quite that far, Bob. It's only 60 miles. Okay. It's the Inland Empire. You gotta travel the 10, man.
Right. You had a lot of great shows. I mean, sometimes we would go to the Orange Pavilion just because it was, standing room only. We went to see Twisted Sister in, what was it, 84 or whatever, when they shot the video for, was it We're Not Gonna Take It, or it was one of the videos?
I think I
Want to Rock.
It might have been The Price or something like that.
Well, I think they did all three of them there. They did the live shots there, then they went to Montebello High School and shot those scenes from the high school there. But I believe all the live scenes were shot at Orange Pavilion.
I think I saw Bon Jovi there. I believe I saw Rat there at one point. In fact, I might have seen Bon Jovi and Rat there together.
Yeah, Bon Jovi opened for Rat on that.
Yeah, in 80, I think it was like 86.
Right.
85 or 86. I'm trying to think. I think that I might have even seen Metallica there at one point.
Oh, wow.
Very early on. San Bernardino, that was kind of an interesting area because they had a great radio station there,
KCAL,
which was KCAL, KCAL, and it was hosted by a guy by the name of Stu and Crew in the morning.
Yeah, KCAL is still going.
They're still going today?
They're still going today. That wouldn't be Stu Herrera,
It would be Stu and crew.
Wow, Stu Herrera's now at KLOS. He's a really good buddy of mine. He worked at KNAC for many, many years. He was doing the metal show on KLOS. I think Full Metal Jackie does a metal show, and then they actually had a Sunday night metal show, but I think it only lasted a couple months. But Stu's the man. Great dude.
Yep. And there was probably one of the best rock clubs. It was in Redlands, California. It was Whiskey Creek, and they were more involved with the more local bands. And somebody that I mentioned to you, Bob, when I saw you in January, these guys weren't exactly metal, but they were made the rounds a lot. A band that played in the LA area was Liquid Blue.
Yes, they're like a big cover band. I think they're still playing covers, believe it or not. Because I talked to one of the guys. He actually hit me up when I did the Inside Metal, the first Inside Metal movie, and he was in Liquid Blue, and that was when the big cover band scene was really huge, especially in places like San Bernardino and in Orange County. You had your original nightclubs, the way back in the day, in the early '80s, the Woodstock, Radio City, and Concert Factory, and the other clubs like Jezebel's. The Marquee used to be called Joshua's. I don't know if you remember that, Lenny, when the Marquee was Joshua's.
Yeah.
And Poets, and there was Oscars and Ichabods. Ichabods became Faces. But all these clubs had cover bands playing. And even Joshua's. That was a huge thing. That was before the tribute bands.
Right. Well, we used to have Liquid Blue come up and play at the Pegasus nightclub probably once a month. They would make the trip up and play Friday and Saturday night. They were a really good cover band, I guess, and they always drew really well.
Dude, they are still together. They got like a Facebook page. Check them out. Seriously. There was another band called the Snowmen that August Redmoon used to play with a lot. I'm sure they played out in San Bernardino. They dressed like snowmen. You remember them, all white? They had these white afros, and they were like really big on the Orange County circuit. And they would headline the Country Club and all these other places. They were a really good band. I mean, they were more poppy, more of a pop band, but really good musicians.
Well, the thing is, Bob and Spickle, here we are 30 years removed from that scene, and it still remains in our minds today as if it was just like yesterday. And people who live today don't realize such a great era in music, especially in the LA scene, because there was so much going on, whether it was metal, hard rock, pop, punk, whatever you want to call it. There was just so much to see. I think there was a time there, probably during a 2 or 3 year period, I would go out and see probably 4 shows a week easily. And there, any night of the week, you could see something if you wanted to.
Absolutely. I grew up in Huntington Beach in Orange County, and I didn't even have to leave Huntington Beach sometimes. There were times I'd go out to the beach at like 11 o'clock. Hang out there all day, and then you're on the beach. And Leatherwolf were the big Huntington Beach band. Leatherwolf, you had Eden, you had Delirium, you had a few, of course, Great White were like the big band that, and they were Dante Fox before then, and Stryper, they were Rock's Regime. So all these were like the Orange County bands. But Leatherwolf were like the big metal band. They got their beginnings doing parties all over Huntington. So you would be at the beach. You would get these flyers, and they would just make up flyers that day, because when you would do a party, within the first 5 songs, the cops would come and break up the party. So they would stuff people in. So, you're hanging out on the beach, and we're talking like, 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you would go to this house party, just packed. And Leatherwolf, I'm telling you, that band had hotter chicks than Poison used to draw at the time. And Huntington at the time had some of the hottest chicks around. And you would go to this party, and they would have like 2 kegs. You'd try to get as much beer as possible, because within the first 3 or 4 songs, cops would come. And so then, you would end up going to the Golden Bear. I'd always go see Randy Hansen, who did the killer Jimi Hendrix tribute. Through like the 80s, I saw like, Robin Trower, Rory Gallagher, Bachman Turner Overdrive, so many cool bands there. And that's right across from the Huntington Beach Pier. And then you would go to, you remember Walter Trout would always play at Perks. You remember Perks, Lenny, on Main
Kinda.
Street? Yeah, that was kind of like a blues, just kind of a dive bar, but this killer guitar player, Walter Trout, who actually became famous in Europe. You mentioned him in Europe. He's like a guitar god. I mean, he was before the Stevie Ray Vaughan's. Billy Gibbons used to come out and jam with him and stuff. The guy's still around. I think he's quite old, but I think he's still playing. But he used to play, he was the house guy at Perks. And this was all within literally a 2-mile radius of each other.
So, Neeley, you mentioned, here we are 30 years later. I got a question for both of you guys. I mean, you look back at music history and you had like the era of the 50s, then you had the 60s, then you had the 70s, then you had the 80s, then you kind of had the 90s, and then it seems like it's all just kind of bottomed out or something. Does that make any sense? There's no new era of music.
Well, the reason being, and Chris, my partner on the Classic Metal Show, and I have covered this on several occasions. One of the biggest drivers of that was some kind of a commercial outlet, some kind of a mass outlet, be it commercial radio, that would be FM in the day. Of course, MTV had a major impact on exposure for this kind of stuff. But once the 90s hit and once the 2000s hit, especially when FM radio, there was no more MTV, FM radio became corporate. It was pre-programmed or programmed from a central location. There was no local flavor anymore. There were no radio programmers anymore. The radio DJs were not permitted to pick and choose what they wanted to play or what they wanted to feature. The reason all that died was because there's no exposure anymore. Everybody's gone to the internet. If you're a local rock band or any kind of a band, whether it's pop rock, whatever your genre is, you post your video or your music on YouTube, you'll be lucky if somebody finds it. If somebody stumbles across it, you'd be lucky. If somebody reposts it on some kind of social media, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or whatever social media they use, you might find it. But when it's centralized to local radio or a national outlet like an MTV, people are going to see it, especially if it gets repeated again and again and again. As you know, your local radio station, when radio used to be good, you would probably hear a new song from a new band 4, maybe 5 times a day. Today, not so much, not happening. There's no MTV. So if you're going to discover a new band, you might find it on Facebook, you might find it on YouTube, but the reason you would find it is because you were actually looking for it. Nobody fed it to you. With turning on your car radio or turning on your MTV on your TV show or on your television, rather, it was given to you. Here's something new from this new band from LA or from Philadelphia or wherever they were from. Now you don't get that anymore. So you have to go look for it yourself. And most people are not going to make that effort. So if you just happen to stumble across something, much like the band Snoo, we've promoted the band Snoo on the Classic Metal Show only because we like them. But the only reason anyone would find out about Snoo through our show is because we actually played it and promoted it. Right. Otherwise, you're not going to hear about it.
Yeah, exactly. And we thank you for that. But, it's really sad. You look back at the history of music, and it's too bad that our kids today, my kids, my grandkids,
grandkids.
You got grandkids?
Is there something I don't know about Victoria? Did she?
I'm talking about future events. I'm saying, like our kids, mine, yours, whose ever, they don't have that to you know what I mean? They don't have that in their life. They don't have a time where, like we had the 70s and the 60s and the 80s. What do they have? They have, there's no zeros or tens or.
Yeah. Well, like Neeley said, the internet really killed it because even if you go back to the 90s, I mean, the early 90s, I think was the prime. When I moved to LA in like 90, 91, that I think was the prime with saying all the clubs. Of course, grunge started to hit, but you still had the LA metal scene was pumping, and you still had all these bands were still quite huge, and Badlands, Lynch Mob.
Right.
I mean, all these bands came out early '90s. Jackal, so there was still that kind of if you want to call it hair metal or whatever scene, was still going on at the same time as the grunge. And then you had, even in the late 90s, and again, this is just pre-internet, you had all the Korns, the Disturbs, the new metal bands, but that was still a scene, whether you like that kind of music or not. There was kind of that scene, even up until like System of a Down to early 2000. Once the 2000s hit, you're right, there's no noticeable bands that really, even... whether you go to Seattle or whatever, that was a scene. The whole grunge was a scene. And there was a certain sound of that scene. The LA kind of had a certain sound. The Seattle had a kind of a certain sound. The new wave of British heavy metal, when it broke in the 79, early 80s, it had a very distinct sound to Britain. Whereas the French bands had a different sound than the German bands. They all had that kind of Krautrout, Scorpions meets Accept kind of sound, or what later became the power metal of bands like Halloween. I mean, even up to when the internet happened, it became so diluted. A band from England or Australia or from Russia that sounds just like Korn or just like, Dokken, or a band from Russia doing a Chicago tribute, right, Neeley?
Yeah, I'm going to go see them next month, as a matter of fact.
Awesome. They sound really good. If they come to California, let me know. I'd love to check them out.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, who's playing arena tours anymore?
The legacy bands, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, you got your
exactly
package.
Right.
You got the package tours, and the festival thing is the same thing. I've always said this. It's basically the same 20 bands just basically shuffled around playing the same fucking festivals over the last several years.
See, we're all at the point in our careers now where you could take your show and make it a PBS special.
Well, that's the one thing I gotta say is I love about Dave Mustaine, the fact that he's getting bands like Armored Saint and Metal Church and
I just saw Metal Church in Lubbock, Texas.
Oh yeah, you were telling me when you were out in Lubbock. How were they?
I was a huge fan of Metal Church. I thought they were one of the hardest rock and metal bands I've ever heard. I totally dug them, and I was I've never seen them before, and I was real excited to go see them. They were playing a little club in Lubbock, and they sounded really good. What's their one original member, the guitar player or something?
Well, yeah. Kurt Vanderhoof, he's the founder, and Mike Howe is the lead vocalist, and the other guys.
Yeah, Mike Howe was an original. Obviously, Dave Wayne passed away, the original singer, but Mike Howe was on their third album with Faith Healer.
Is that the guy from Heretic?
Yeah, he was in Heretic and Snare before that.
I hate to knock anybody because I give everybody credit, especially these guys who are still out doing it. Their show was not a good visual show. They didn't bring you in to their show. It was kind of sad. I mean, I was really looking forward to seeing them and excited, and it was just kind of boring. It was like it almost looked like they were just up there going through the motions.
That's because they were playing Lubbock.
It could be. Yeah, there's only about 20 people there, but it's like a band like that. I don't know if it goes back to the business aspect of management or what have you. I would think a band like that should be doing much bigger and better shows. And I know they got a big tour coming up, with Armored Saint or somebody?
Well, they did a tour with Armored Saint. In fact, I know Neeley. I was you came down for the screening of Inside Metal that time. You saw him at the Whiskey, Armored Saint.
Yeah, I saw him at the Whiskey with Armored Saint, and I just saw them in March with Doro. And I'm big Metal Church fan, huge Metal Church fan.
Me too, man.
I loved every minute of it. I thought they were great. They sounded great. Mike Howe was just he was on fire. Doro did a great job. It was a good show.
Yeah, I think you probably saw a bad show of them, and they may have been turned off by being in Lubbock, Texas, and playing in front of 20 people.
It could have been. You never know what's going on with the band out on the road. But I just thought it was going to be. I don't know. I guess I just expected something different. Maybe I don't even know what I expected, but they did sound good. I'll give them that. But it just looked like they were a bunch of guys from different bands. It almost looked like a Metal Church tribute band.
Well, they got Stet Howland on drums, so that should say something for you.
Right? Wasp. Yeah, exactly.
He's a great drummer, though, from Wasp.
But what a great band. Killer songs. Yeah.
Any other topics of interest?
Well, to kind of wrap up the whole subject, Bob, and I know you're well aware of this, and I'm sure that Spickle is well aware of this as well, but something that our good friend Lon Friend was heavily involved with at the end of the 80s or into the early 90s, obviously, was the movie Airheads, which kind of tried to capture the essence of LA metal, of bands trying to make it and getting their music played on the air and be noticed and be signed and all these other things. What was your thoughts on that movie? Was that cheesy movie? Was it realistic movie? Was it a stupid movie and they should have never made it? Or what is your thoughts? Because obviously Lemmy made a cameo in that, and Brendan Fraser, obviously he played the lead in this along with Steve Buscemi and Adam Sandler was in it. And they try to capture that whole LA scene. But in my opinion, even though it was kind of an enjoyable movie in a cheesy, campy kind of way, it was too little too late.
Well, you're right. That was a huge cast for that movie. And, it's funny you mentioned that because I was thinking kids today that see that movie that have no idea about like what record companies and what record companies do, or radio stations and the influence of radio stations, why this band would want their song played so bad. They probably have absolutely no idea. So as far as it being relevant today to kids, I could see, they're probably, wondering what the fuck is this all about. But
I thought that movie was fucking hilarious. That was a great movie.
I thought it was pretty cheesy even back then. I mean, you had a lot of there was a lot of those movies. Halloween song, Trick or Treat movie. Andrew Dice Clay
was in it.
Yeah, Ozzy was in that.
Fastway did the soundtrack.
Yeah, and then you had that Andrew Dice Clay movie. What was that? A Ford Fairlane, of course, which had Vince Neil, and that was kind of a metal themed movie.
When you're hanging off the edge of the Capitol Tower, the Capitol Records building, that is truly metal.
Did you guys see the Queen movie? And what were your thoughts?
I actually thought it was going to be a lot worse than it was, so I was
worse.
I actually was kind of pleasantly surprised in the sense that I thought it was just going to be about Freddie, but the fact that they had, because I know the guys in the band were involved with it, and I'm glad that they brought up the fact that they were all like equal members, because so many people today thought, when Freddie died, the band died. That was, obviously Freddie was the front man, the most flamboyant, but John Deacon wrote most of the hit songs, him and Brian May. The drummer was a huge part. He sang a lot of the lead vocals on some of their songs. I thought it was going to be all about Freddie and the dramatic stuff about it. Now, the time frame was all fucked up in certain places, of course, but, that's how it is with Hollywood. Yeah, I mean, I thought the Queen movie was 100% better than the Motley Crue movie. I think when I saw it, I thought I was expecting it to be a lot worse.
How about you, Neeley? Did you see it?
I did not see it. I just read the reviews, but I did not watch it because I have very little interest.
Gotcha. Now, what about the Elton John movie?
We talked about that on the Classic Metal Show about two weeks ago. I have not seen the movie, and all I can tell you is that the hype about the quote-unquote the gay sex scenes being deleted in some markets kind of ruined the whole idea for me. It's just like, why is that the focus? The guy's a musical genius. He's made millions of records, or has sold millions of records. He's had a 50-year career. He's an icon in the music business, and you're just going to taint it due to his sexual proclivity,
right?
So you just ruined it for me.
Yeah, it was when I went to go see the movie, I had no idea it was going to be a musical. And
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. So it was like a cross between a documentary, movie, musical, and it was actually pretty good. But they did actually, they kind of went almost out of their way to show his sexuality. It was almost, there was like a little bit of Brokeback Mountain in there. It was. So I don't know why they focused on that so much. It was kind of weird.
That's why I kind of liked the Queen movie, because everyone thought it was going to be all about Freddie and him being gay and all the people that he was with, and they showed a little bit of it. But that was why like Sacha Baron quit. They all wanted it to exploit that. That they thought that was going to be what to exploit. All about Freddie, and I appreciate the fact that they didn't do that. So how would you compare it to the Queen movie, Lenny?
Two very different movies. I mean, in the Queen movie, they kind of insinuated, Freddie's sexuality, and obviously that is apparent. And but again, Elton John, the Elton John movie, they just really, really focused on that. I don't know if that's Elton himself wanting that portrayed or the writer. I mean, who knows? And again, I could care less. The guy, both of those guys were just brilliant artists. Such amazing music that we got out of both of those bands. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, well, I heard the same thing about the Elton movies. They really exploit that fact.
Maybe it has something to do with the times that we're in right now. Where
of course it does.
A lot of people are pushing.
It's all about being relevant to today's times. In today's times,
correct.
They know that's what is going to get the biggest amount of not just exposure, but the biggest amount of hype and people talking about it and news stories about it and social media expression. And with the whole gay movement that's so huge now, they're going to obviously exploit that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a business.
I think that played a big role in it. Yeah. So Snoo just received an award for Producer's Choice Album of the Year. There was a big award show up in Vegas at the Hard Rock, so I wanted to throw that out. And then earlier I said I had a big announcement. Do you guys remember the band Reverend?
Reverend?
No, not Reverend. Reverent.
Reverend? No, never heard of it.
You remember Reverend, speed metal band from the early 90s?
No, do you, Neeley?
No, I thought he was talking about Reverend with Wayne, but okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, the guitar player Dave Django, myself, Curtis Don Vito on vocals. We've got a little metal project that is in the beginning stages.
All right.
You guys will be excited about it.
More of a thrash metal, or how would you compare it musically to Snoo?
Oh, no, it's very different than Snoo. This is definitely going to be heavy metal. Snoo's more of a rock band, hard rock band. This is we're not going to be thrash metal. It's not speed metal. I mean, we're 80s guys, you know what I mean? So it's probably going to be something right out of our next stage from 80s metal.
Right on.
Yeah.
We'll definitely look for that. And what's the band's name?
We haven't even gotten to that point yet. We're still in.
Well, why even announce it when you don't have a goddamn name, Spickle?
We're going to call it Nalbandian.
I think they should just call it Spickle.
We may go that route.
You think Curtis would agree to that? Featuring Spickle. How about Spickle's Pickle?
But think about Curtis's voice on a metal record.
Yeah, well, that Snoo is pretty metal. They had some pretty metal songs.
Not really.
I mean, more anthemic pop metal, but...
Yeah, more AC/DC style.
Sure.
Right, exactly. But picture like Curtis doing Priest and Maiden, that kind of stuff.
Curtis is a fantastic singer.
Yeah, it could be fun. And we're thinking about maybe doing an Eden show to launch the project. It's all just kind of in the works. We're talking about different things.
So you and Mr. Winslow have been talking.
I haven't actually talking to Gary. Yeah, no one's heard or seen of Dave. He kind of disappeared off the planet.
He's in Lubbock.
We don't know where he is.
He's in Texas somewhere, apparently.
But I got a local guy here down at the lake who's a really amazing metal drummer. So
all right. So for Snoo, they could snoo.com, right?
Snooyou.com.
Snooyou.com.
SNEWYOU.com.
There you go.
Yeah, Snoo you, pal.
And you can find me, Lenny Spickle, on Facebook.
And Mr. Neeley.
Of course, the mighty Classic Metal Show in its 24th year, theclassicmetalshow.com, and all your social media outlets and Minds and Gab and Daily Motion and all that kind of good stuff. You can find all of our content there on a daily basis, and a live show on Saturday night via Spreaker.com/CMS Rocks, or our affiliate, which is Uncontrolled Noise. That's with a Z.com.
Very cool. And Saturday nights, listen to them live.
Yep.
Absolutely.
At 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific time, 6 hours of in-your-face debauchery and hate and racism and everything else you can throw in there.
All right. Yeah. Well, what's the deal with Chris? I've been listening to the last couple podcasts, and he keeps saying that he's off Facebook. I'm off Facebook now. He is all over Facebook.
Well, we're moving away from the mainstream social media, which is Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we are moving to the alternative medias of Minds, Gab, Daily Motion, that kind of stuff, because we don't like censorship and we don't like corporate censorship. So we are not going to be supporting those social media platforms for very much longer.
Well, I guess
I love hearing that.
I'm going to have to open up a new account. I tried to minimize it with Facebook and just Twitter, and rarely use Twitter, as you know, and I think I opened up an Instagram and never on that, and now I'm going to have to open up these new accounts. Hopefully it'll be the case of Facebook will fall the same way MySpace did, and all these new ones will take over, so we'll see. So I should get in on it on the ground floor, I guess, Neeley.
If you care about freedom of speech, you will move away from the corporate media, social media websites.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very, very cool, gentlemen. Well, I appreciate it. I know this was a scattered podcast, but
it was fun.
Bob, it was fun.
And it flew by.
And my voice is back. Look at it. It lasted the whole show. Wow.
We didn't even get involved with lactation or afterbirth.
That's going to be on the next show. Yeah, we kept it tame this time. We thought we were going to get the dirty side of Spickle, but it's been very, very tame. Maybe you can share that with Chris Aiken. I think he'll be more your style to do that than Neeley, because I'm sure Chris will have a lot of his own stories, and you guys could just basically compete with each other. Who has the sickest story? And I would maybe have to give it to Mr. Aiken, although I do know some of Leonard's stories. It would be a pretty close match. We might have to do that one next. Chris's Korea stories versus Lenny Spickle's Hollywood and Orange County stories.
Bring it on.
All right, gentlemen. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast. Subscribe and listen to all episodes by going to our pages on iTunes, Spreaker, YouTube, Spotify, and more. You can listen to all other episodes and access up-to-date information and news on the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast by going to our website at www.shockwaveskullsessions.com. Email all comments, questions, and suggestions to shockwaveskullsessions@gmail.com.